In the convergence of Torah law and prophetic revelation lies a stunning pattern. The servitude and release of the Hebrew slave, the cycles of agricultural rest, and the end-time harvest all point to a singular moment in sacred time. This video will uncover the timing of this convergence. My name is Ryan, and this is my channel, Counting from Caleb. The late Chuck Missler used to always say, in the Old Testament, the new is concealed, in the new, the old is revealed. To understand what we find in the New Testament, we have to look to the Old. The Old Testament finds its full meaning and clarity through the lens of the New. The veiled patterns are unveiled in the New Testament, and to understand the book of Revelation, we need to find its connections in the Old Testament. Matthew 13:39. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. Matthew 3:12. His winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor, and to gather his wheat into the barn, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. James 5:7-8. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it, until it receives the early and latter rains. Joel 3:12. Swing the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, trample the grapes, for the winepress is full. The wine vats overflow, because their wickedness is great. 1 Corinthians 15:35-58 is saturated with harvest imagery, particularly the resurrection as the harvest of the righteous. Paul draws heavily from Torah-based agricultural metaphors to describe how the dead are raised, transformed, and gathered, aligning with both the Moedim and the Torah laws of first fruits, main harvest, and gleanings. The last trumpet is the final legal trumpet for harvest according to Torah law, sounded on Yom Teruah, the only moed explicitly marked by trumpet blasts. This trumpet is not merely symbolic, it is a covenantal signal declaring the close of redemption's ingathering and initiating the season of judgment and restoration. It is the final Yom Teruah, announcing that the harvest window is now complete and that the final Sabbatical and Jubilee years have arrived. Revelation 14:15. Then another angel came out of the temple, crying out in a loud voice to the one seated on the cloud, Swing your sickle and reap, because the time has come to harvest, for the crop of the earth is ripe. So the one seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Revelation 14:17-19 describes the harvesting of the grapes. Swing your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the vine of the earth, because its grapes are ripe. So the angel swung his sickle over the earth and gathered the grapes of the earth, and he threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. The Harpazo, or catching away, is not random or escapist. It is the legal, covenantal harvest of the righteous at the end of the age, gathered by the king who planted them, ripened them, and now reaps them in righteousness. We will be caught up, Harpazo, to meet the Lord. Harpazo means to seize suddenly, decisively, and by force, with public demonstration of power, like a military legal rescue, like a bride being seized for a wedding procession, like spoils being taken from a defeated enemy. Yeshua reclaims his own. It happens visibly, audibly with a trumpet in command, and triumphantly. The harvest at the end of the age is not just imagery, it is a Torah-defined process. Yeshua, as the faithful high priest and judge, will not violate Yahweh's harvest instructions. So if you want to understand when the righteous are gathered, the wicked are judged, and the land is restored, you must understand Yahweh's laws for sowing, reaping, and resting. By understanding Yahweh's covenant laws for harvest cycles and servant release as laid out in Exodus 23, Leviticus 25, and Deuteronomy 15, we can identify the lawful timing for the Harpazo, the gathering of the righteous at the end of the age. So let's dig into each and see what is revealed. Leviticus 25:1-4. And spoke Yahweh to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to Yahweh. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh. Leviticus 25:8-12. And you shall count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to 49 years. Then you are to sound the shofar far and wide on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. You shall sound it throughout your land. So you are to consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty in the land for all its inhabitants. It is a jubilee for you, and you have turned back each to his possession. Indeed, you return each to his family. The 50th year will be a jubilee for you. You are not to sow the land, or reap its aftergrowth, or harvest the untended vines. For it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may eat only the crops taken directly from the field. As there is no sowing or reaping in a sabbatical or jubilee year, they can be ruled out as possible years for the final harvest. The harvest at the end of the age must occur in a legal harvest year, one of the 6 years in which sowing and reaping are permitted. This underscores the importance of aligning prophetic fulfillment with Torah's agricultural laws, revealing that redemption follows legal order, not human convenience. The end-time harvest is not random, lawless, or unknown. It must fully obey Yahweh's established harvest laws, just like every other covenantal process in Scripture. Yahweh's pattern is revealed, legal, and prophetically timed, not mysterious in its structure, even if the exact hour remains hidden. Exodus 12, 1-2 records Yahweh's instructions to Moses and Aaron in Egypt. This month shall be the beginning, Rosh, of months for you. It shall be the first month of the year, Hashanah to you. This marked the establishment of the Exodus calendar, with the month of Abib now called Nisan as the first of the year. Without recognizing that Nisan is the covenantal starting point, the structure of redemption, release, and final restoration would not fully make sense. This verse resets Israel's calendar, not by agricultural or civil standards, but by redemptive timing. For it is upon this foundation, the Exodus calendar, that the Torah builds the entire rhythm of Shemitah, Jubilee, and the end-time harvest. In my video, The Year of Jubilee and the Synchronization of God's Spring and Fall Calendars, I demonstrated how Yahweh gives instruction of the merging of these two calendars. To understand the timing of the harvest, the release of slaves, the land rest, and the Jubilee, you must see how Nisan and Tishri work together. This synchronization reflects divine design. From that video, I presented that these key words are crucial for comprehending the sabbatical and jubilee year placement. Hashanah translates to the year. The term combines the definite article ha, meaning the, with shana, meaning year, specifying a particular year. This term is referring to the complete year, emphasizing events following a completed yearly cycle. And Bashana translates to in the year. This term combines the preposition ba, meaning in, with shana, meaning year, situating events within the time frame of a specific year, indicating that actions occur before the year's completion. The events are occurring within the year specified. The Torah uses two distinct phrases to legally designate the sabbatical year, each reflecting a different calendar framework established by Yahweh. Nisan governs covenantal justice and uses the term Bashana Hashaviat, in the 7th year, in Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 15. Tishri governs earthly rest and uses the phrase Vehashaviat, but the 7th year, pointing to the Tishri-based agricultural cycle in Exodus 23:11. Exodus 23:10-11 lays out the foundational agricultural principle behind the sabbatical year. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its produce, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and life follow, so that the poor of your people may eat. It follows the Tishri-based agricultural cycle, beginning with fall planting and concluding with harvest. It provides the creation-based rest pattern, but does not establish legal timing. Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 15 are the legal application by the Nisan calendar. Leviticus 25:4 and 9-10 uses Bashana Hashaviat, in the 7th year. It counts sabbatical and jubilee years from Nisan. It legally links land rest to the covenantal calendar. It adds enforcement and judicial weight to what Exodus outlines in principle. Deuteronomy 15:1-12 uses Bashana Hashaviat, in the 7th year. Again, it applies the same sabbatical cycle to servant release and debt cancellation. It confirms that all these actions occur within the 7th Nisan year, though actual observance, sowing cessation, and servant release begins at Tishri. There are two ways to designate the sabbatical year because Yahweh established two covenantal clocks. One begins in Nisan to govern legal redemption, including the release of servants, the cancellation of debts, and the counting of Shemitah and Jubilee cycles according to the covenantal calendar. The other begins in Tishri to govern land and provision, tied to the agricultural rhythms of sowing, reaping, and the resting of the land. The sabbatical year, Shemitah, brings these two calendars into perfect alignment, uniting heaven's justice with earth's rest, a convergence of redemption and restoration. So Exodus 23:10-11 gives the basic agricultural rhythm of sowing, harvesting, and resting, rooted in the creation cycle and lived from Tishri to Tishri. Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 15 provide the covenantal framework for how and when these commands are to be enacted, legally counted from Nisan, and practically enacted from Tishri. The 7th Tishri year is called the Shemitah. It begins on Yom Teruah, the first day of the 7th month, Bashanah, in the 7th year counted from Nisan. This sabbatical year is not only the appointed time that includes the release of servants and cancellation of debts, but also the year when sowing and reaping are suspended, and the land itself is released into rest. It marks the completion of a full covenantal cycle, a rhythm of freedom, rest, and restoration ordained by Yahweh. Exodus 23, Deuteronomy 15, and Leviticus 25 weave together the Tishri-based agricultural calendar and the Nisan-based covenantal calendar, anchoring the Sabbatical and Jubilee cycles into one unified structure that synchronizes personal and land redemption, a pattern that prophetically foreshadows Messiah's end-time restoration of creation. So in covenantal and legal contexts, the Torah uses the phrase Bashanah HaShaviat, in the 7th year, anchoring the start of the sabbatical year within the 7th Nisan year. Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 15 form parallel covenantal frameworks that overlay and complement each other. They are not separate systems, but two lenses through which Yahweh's rhythm of redemption is revealed, one through the land, the other through servanthood. Together, they reveal that the final gathering of the righteous is not arbitrary or disconnected, but is bound to the same cycles that governed Israel's ancient seasons of freedom and inheritance. These laws establish that the end-time redemption unfolds in rhythm with the appointed patterns of Shemitah and Jubilee, a prophetic alignment of justice, liberty, and restoration. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. The 6 years of sowing and pruning are measured by the agricultural Tishri-based cycle, tied directly to the natural seasons in the land's labor. But in Bashanah, the 7th year, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh. The 6 Tishri-based agricultural years end at Tishri 1, and the sabbatical rest actions begin within the middle of the 7th Nisan year. And you shall count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to 49 years. On the 10th day of the 7th month, the 50th year, will be a jubilee for you. You are not to sow the land, or reap its aftergrowth, or harvest the untended vines. As in a sabbatical year, there is no sowing or reaping allowed in a jubilee year. Daniel's 70th week represents the final Shabuah, 7-year cycle, following a previous Shabuah that ends in a sabbatical year, during which sowing and reaping are prohibited by Torah. The 70th week likewise concludes with a sabbatical year, immediately followed by a jubilee year, resulting in 2 consecutive years where no agricultural work is permitted. The jubilee is God's covenant reset, freedom, restoration, and inheritance fulfilled in Messiah's final redemption. The 6 years in which sowing and reaping are allowed begin in the month of Tishri. The start of the month of Nisan, however, is determined by the barley reaching the Abib stage. If the barley is Abib, then the Feast of First Fruits is observed on the first day of the week following the weekly Sabbath during Passover. The reaping season begins at First Fruits in the spring and extends through the summer months, concluding in the fall around the time of the Moed of Ingathering, or Sukkot. This cycle of sowing and reaping spans 6 agricultural years. However, at Yom Teruah, a hard stop is imposed on the harvest to inaugurate the sabbatical year, a divinely mandated rest that continues through the following Jubilee year. If Daniel's 70th week has indeed begun, the 6-year sowing and reaping period would be from sundown October 4th, 2024 to sundown September 29th, 2030. This would place the final harvest reaping period between First Fruits April 20th, 2025 to Yom Teruah beginning at sundown September 29th, 2030. Let's add another layer to narrow down the timing of the Harpazo, or harvest of the end of the age. Deuteronomy 15 begins by commanding the Shemitah, meaning release, and the rest of the chapter unfolds its covenantal applications. The forgiveness of debts, the liberation of servants, the provision for the poor, and the willing dedication of lifelong service to Yahweh. It is not a random set of moral laws. It is a unified covenantal structure governed by the rhythm of the sabbatical year. Deuteronomy 15 gives the Torah's legal foundation for the timing, nature, and prophetic structure of the final end-time gathering of the righteous, the Harpazo, and it aligns perfectly with the sabbatical year release, the Shemitah. Deuteronomy 15:1, at the end, Mekes of every 7 years, you shall grant a release, Shemitah, of debts. Deuteronomy 15:1 teaches that the release of debts is granted at the conclusion of every 7 years, not at the beginning, but after the full sabbatical cycle is complete. The term Makes does more than mark time. It defines a covenantal completion point. It affirms that the legal count begins at Nisan 1 of year 1, and the sabbatical year is declared in the 7th Nisan year, and the cycle is only complete at the end of that year, which is also the end of the Tishri-based agricultural year, the close of land rest. Deuteronomy 15:12. If a fellow Hebrew, a man or woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in Bashanah, the 7th year, you must set him free. The 6 years of servitude for a Hebrew slave align with the Tishri-based agricultural and harvest cycle. The Torah tightly integrates servitude with the harvest cycle because in ancient Israel, economic life, and thus slavery for debt, was directly tied to agricultural productivity. Planting, harvest, and land cycles all began in Tishri, but setting him free is designated by the covenantal Nisan calendar. And when you release him, do not send him away empty-handed. You are to furnish him liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. The threshing floor and winepress represent the final provision in prophetic separation that occurred just before the Shemitah begins. Their mention in Deuteronomy 15:14 shows that the release of servants at the start of the sabbatical year is not isolated. It is accompanied by the final harvest, the bestowed blessing, and the moment of covenantal division. At the start of the final sabbatical year, the faithful are released, rewarded, and separated like wheat from chaff, while the winepress of wrath begins for the unrepentant. This reflects the dual outworking of Torah justice, blessing, and recompense. To understand how servant release and land rest align, you must overlay both the Nisan-based and Tishri-based year counts. The covenantal calendar, Nisan, establishes the legal designation of the 7th year. It governs the timing of release, redemption, and inheritance, including the release of servants, the cancellation of debts, and the counting of sabbatical and jubilee cycles. The agricultural calendar, Tishri, governs the practical observance of the sabbatical year, when sowing ceases, servitude ends, and the land is released into rest. Yahweh weaves these two calendars together to perfectly synchronize personal redemption and land redemption. So if we overlay Deuteronomy 15 with Leviticus 25, it gives us a complete picture. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit, aligns with, if a fellow Hebrew, a man or woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years. But in Bashanah, the 7th year, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh, aligns with, then in Bashanah, the 7th year, you must set him free. The use of the phrase Bashanah HaShaviat, in the 7th year, in both the land rest command from Leviticus 25:4 and the servant release law from Deuteronomy 15:12 proves that these two commands are not isolated. They are legally synchronized within the same sabbatical cycle, counted from Nisan, as established in Exodus 12:2. Leviticus 25:4, in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath. Deuteronomy 15:12, in the 7th year, you shall let the servant go free. Though both events are counted from Nisan, the observable actions, land rest and servant release, take effect at Tishri 1, the beginning of the Shemitah. When Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 15 are brought into harmony, it becomes evident that the final harvest at the end of the age is not random or flexible. It is covenantally regulated by Torah law. Deuteronomy 15 governs the release of the individual servant, who must be freed at the beginning of the sabbatical year and furnished with blessing from the flock, threshing floor, and winepress. Leviticus 25 governs the restoration of national inheritance, requiring both land and people to rest during the sabbatical year and be fully restored at the Jubilee year that follows. Additionally, Deuteronomy 15:1 mandates the release of debts at the end of 7 years, completing the cycle of personal freedom and economic reset. This debt release at the close of the sabbatical year aligns perfectly with the opening of the Jubilee at the end of every 49 years, when liberty is proclaimed throughout the land, and all inheritances return to their rightful owners. Together these laws revealed that the righteous must be gathered at the very start of the sabbatical year, at Yom Teruah, because this is the only lawful window for harvesting before the land enters its commanded rest. There is no sowing or gathering in a sabbatical or Jubilee year. Therefore, the end-time harvest, the gathering of the elect, must occur precisely as the sabbatical year begins. This aligns perfectly with Yeshua's parable of the wheat, in which the righteous are gathered into the barn before judgment begins. The Harpazo corresponds to the servant's release described in Deuteronomy 15, and the full restoration of land and nations cannot lawfully proceed until both the gathering and the atonement are completed within the sabbatical year. The entire sequence, release, rest, and restoration, follows Yahweh's covenantal blueprint, confirming that the final redemption must unfold according to the appointed times established in the Torah. The acceptable year of Yahweh. The release cycle established by Shemitah finds its prophetic fulfillment in Isaiah 61. In the Torah, Shemitah designates the 7th Tishri year, beginning within the 7th Nisan year, as a sacred time when servants are set free, debts are canceled, and the land enters rest. This cycle forms a covenantal rhythm of justice and mercy, a prophetic shadow pointing forward to the greater redemption to come. Isaiah 61 announces the arrival of that ultimate fulfillment: liberty to the captives, freedom to the prisoners, the proclamation of the favorable year of Yahweh, and the beginning of the day of vengeance. The final Shemitah cycle aligns with the gathering of the bride at the start of the 7th year, the execution of judgment during the sabbatical year, and the sounding of the Jubilee trumpet at Yom Kippur to inaugurate the full restoration of inheritance and the reign of Messiah. Thus the Torah's pattern of Shemitah is not abolished but fulfilled in the redemption, judgment, and restoration proclaimed by Isaiah 61, perfectly linking the sabbatical year to the Harpazo and the coming Jubilee. To proclaim the acceptable, Ratzon, year of Yahweh, and the day of vengeance of our God. The word Ratzon means favor, goodwill, pleasure, acceptance. It refers to a time when Yahweh is pleased to act in mercy and redemption based on covenant timing. It is not generic grace, it's a lawful, appointed window of divine favor. Yeshua's proclamation at his first coming aligned with the Shemitah, the sabbatical year of release, establishing a prophetic pattern in which liberty is spiritually declared, burdens are lifted, and the covenantal restoration begins. This acceptable year of Yahweh, Isaiah 61:2 and Luke 4:19, was not the Jubilee, but it foreshadowed the final Shemitah of his second coming, a year that will begin with the release of the righteous, proceed through judgment and vengeance, and culminate in the Jubilee trumpet of full redemption and restoration, when the land is returned, the captives are freed, and the kingdom is inherited. Yeshua's proclamation in Luke 4:18 through 19 is a spirit-led prophetic weaving of Isaiah 61, Isaiah 58, and Isaiah 42, not a verbatim quotation from the Hebrew scroll of Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. Yeshua deliberately stopped short of reading the day of vengeance because it was not yet time for judgment, only time for proclaiming liberty and salvation. Yeshua's selective reading of Isaiah 61 was deliberate. By omitting bind up the brokenhearted, freedom to the prisoners, the day of vengeance, and to comfort all who mourn, he signaled that his first coming was to proclaim redemption, while deferring judgment and national restoration to the final sabbatical year. By adding sight to the blind, he identified himself with Isaiah 42's servant, bringing light to those in darkness, a core part of his first mission. To set free the oppressed is drawn from Isaiah 58:6, and was deliberately added by Yeshua to emphasize his mission against religious injustice and spiritual bondage. All four omitted phrases of Isaiah 61 are deliberately deferred by Yeshua in Luke 4, because they pertain to his second coming, not his first. These phrases will be fulfilled in the final sabbatical year, the day of vengeance, followed by the Jubilee year of complete restoration. Yeshua's selective reading separates the redemptive mission of his first sabbatical year from the judicial and restorative mission of his final sabbatical year. What he read aligned with his first advent, spiritual liberty, healing, and invitation. What he omitted will be fulfilled in the sabbatical and Jubilee year at his return. He will bring vengeance upon the wicked, liberty to the remnant, and full covenantal restoration, returning the people to their inheritance and the kingdom to its rightful king. Freedom to the prisoners appears in some translations of Luke 4:18, but it cannot indicate that the Jubilee was being fulfilled at Yeshua's first coming. When Yeshua read in the synagogue, Rome still occupied Israel, the land was not returned, no trumpet was sounded, the exiles were not regathered, the inheritance was not restored. Instead, this line serves as a prophetic preview of what he will accomplish at his second coming, during the final sabbatical year, culminating in the Jubilee, when the land is returned, the people are restored, and the kingdom is inherited by its rightful heirs. The Jubilee cannot precede justice. The land cannot be returned, and liberty cannot be declared until covenant breaking is judged, and both the sanctuary and the righteous are vindicated. The Jubilee trumpet will only sound after the sabbatical year of vengeance has run its full course, completing the legal pattern established in Torah, where justice precedes restoration and cleansing precedes glory. 2 Thessalonians 2:1-4 presents a clear sequence that definitively marks when the final Shabuah, Daniel's 70th week, is in effect, and when the day of the Lord and the Harpazo can lawfully begin. Now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to be easily disconcerted or alarmed by any spirit or message or letter seeming to be from us, alleging that the day of the Lord has already come. Let no one deceive you in any way, for it will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness, the son of destruction, is revealed. He will oppose and exalt himself above every so-called God or object of worship. So he will seat himself in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. The revealing of the man of sin is the unmistakable, public moment when it becomes clear to all who have understanding that the final Shabuah is truly in effect. It is the prophesied trigger event that Paul says must happen before the day of the Lord and before our gathering to him. The brothers were worried that the day of the Lord had already come, and thus that they had not been gathered to Christ as promised. Paul corrects them by saying, "Do not be deceived. You will not be gathered, and the day of the Lord will not begin until first the rebellion and the revealing of the man of sin occur. After those signs, the true gathering will happen, and then the day of the Lord, the outpouring of God's wrath, will unfold." The opening of the sixth seal is the prophetic signal that redemption is near. Matthew 24:29-31. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. At that time the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Revelation 6:12-17. And I saw when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, a great earthquake came, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree casts her unripe figs, being shaken by a great wind. And the sky departed as a scroll rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich, and the chiefs of thousands, and the mighty, and every servant, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. And they say to the mountains and to the rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who is sitting on the throne, and from the anger of the Lamb, because the great day of his anger has come, and who is able to stand? These are two parallel accounts, one spoken by Yeshua in Matthew 24, and the other from John's prophetic vision in Revelation 6, describing the turning point in redemptive history when the gathering of the elect is initiated and the wrath of the Lamb begins. Luke 21:28. And when these things begin to come to pass, then stand up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Your redemption draweth nigh refers to the prophetic timing when Yeshua, the kinsman redeemer, rises to claim his people, gather his bride, and restore the covenant inheritance. Luke 21 and Revelation 6 are not in tension. They are two angles on the same moment. They work together to form a prophetic composite of the sixth seal event, which is not only a cosmic disruption, but a redemptive inflection point in the end-time sequence. Revelation gives us the cosmic signs, Luke gives us the human response, and Messiah's encouragement. Together they frame the sixth seal as the moment when heaven, earth, and hearts are shaken, and the bride is told to lift her head, for the kinsman redeemer is about to act. After this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back its four winds, so that no wind would blow on land or sea or on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east with the seal of the living God, and he called out in a loud voice to the four angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea, Do not harm the land or the sea or trees until we have sealed the foreheads of the servants of our God. The order of the named tribes of the 144,000 in Revelation 7 is not random. Their Hebrew meaning and birth context tells a story of a bride redeemed. She is afflicted, unloved, and struggling, But in the end, she is joined to her husband, receives her wages, and is honored with the son of the right hand. It isn't just a tribal list, it's a wedding procession, and the 144,000 are the first fruits of the bride's restoration, sealed before the final harvest begins. Now I will praise Yahweh, for surely he has seen my affliction. What good fortune, happy am I, for I have struggled and prevailed. God has made me forget all my toil, for he has heard that I was unloved. Now my husband will be joined to me. God has given me my wages, and gifted me a good gift. Yahweh shall add to me the son of his right hand. The alignment in the heavens on Yom Teruah 5791 Hebrew, September 29, 2030, featuring the woman Virgo clothed in the sun, the new moon beneath her feet, and a crown of 12 stars above her head, serves not only as a visual fulfillment of Revelation 12:1-2, but also as a divinely timed confirmation that the final Shemitah has begun. Revelation 14:14, And I saw, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud one sitting like a son of man, having on his head a golden Stephanos, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Yeshua wears his Stephanos crown at Yom Teruah because he is going forth as the faithful judge and victorious high priest to separate the wheat from the tares. He is gathering his own in the legal order to harvest at the end of the age. This crown is not yet of worldly dominion, but of righteous authority and covenantal faithfulness. But at the end of the sabbatical year, on Yom Kippur, he returns with many diadems. This is the king returning in glory, crowned not only in heaven, but openly on earth, to reign in justice, fulfill the Jubilee, and restore the rightful inheritance to his people. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares also appeared. And the servants said, Do you want us to go and gather them? But the master said, No, lest in gathering the tares you uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. Then at harvest time I will say to the reapers, Gather the tares first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. In the parable of the wheat and the tares, Yeshua begins with a third-person description, but by verse 30 he shifts to first person. This deliberate change signals that Yeshua is not merely telling a story about someone else. He is revealing his own role as master of the field and lord of the harvest. It is a veiled Messianic claim wrapped in parable. As the one who gives orders to the reapers, he alone determines the timing and method of separation, underscoring his sovereign authority over the end-time harvest. Swing your sickle and reap, because the time has come to harvest, for the crop of the earth is ripe. So the one seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Yeshua is seated on a white cloud with a golden Stephanos crown and a sharp sickle, fulfilling the prophetic pattern of Yom Teruah at the beginning of the sabbatical year, when the captives are released and the harvest of the earth occurs, in full alignment with Torah's covenantal laws. The redemption of the 144,000 as firstfruits, along with those gathered at the main harvest at Yom Teruah before the wrath, corresponds prophetically to Torah's law of early release by a kinsman redeemer. This tiered redemption culminates in the Harpazo, the dramatic catching away of the righteous, where Messiah, acting as the Goel, gathers his redeemed before the winepress of judgment begins. Matthew 24:22, And if those days were not shortened, no flesh would have been saved, but because of the elect will those days be shortened. The shortening of days in Matthew 24:22 is directly tied to the harvest of the elect. It is a protection of the covenant people, and essential to the structure of the final sabbatical year. Leviticus 25:4-5, But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh. You shall not sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. You shall not reap what grows of itself, nor gather the grapes of your unpruned vines. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. In a typical year, grape harvest may continue into early Tishri, but in a sabbatical year, the Torah imposes a divinely ordained cutoff. No harvesting may occur beginning Tishri 1. This command draws a prophetic boundary around the end of the age harvest. It signals that the reaping of souls, like the gathering of grapes, must be completed before the sabbatical year begins. The urgency is not agricultural, but eschatological. Once the trumpet sounds, no more reaping is permitted. What follows is not harvest, but judgment. This explains why Revelation 14's grape imagery appears immediately before the full outpouring of wrath. It reveals that the final separation must be immediate and final once the sabbatical year begins. It shows that the Torah's agricultural cycles are prophetic blueprints for the structure of the end-time harvest and judgment. What follows is the final sabbatical year, from Yom Teruah to Yom Kippur. It is a year and 10-day cosmic day of atonement that I presented in my video, The Day of the Lord, Yom Kippur, and Daniel's 2300. This is the same length of time Noah and his family were protected in the ark. Like Noah's protection in the ark, it is a season of wrath and cleansing, where trumpet and bowl judgments prepare the earth for Yeshua's return as king and the Jubilee restoration that follows. Revelation 19:11-14. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses, dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Yeshua's appearances at the beginning and end of the final Shemitah year, the acceptable year of Yahweh, form a prophetic inclusion, divinely timed bookends of redemption and royal authority. At Yom Teruah he comes crowned with a Stephanos, the victor's crown, signifying his role as the righteous judge who initiates the final harvest of the earth. At the culmination of the Shemitah, on Yom Kippur, he returns wearing many diadems, symbols of royal dominion to execute final judgment, destroy the beast, proclaim liberty throughout the land, and inaugurate the Jubilee kingdom. The Shemitah year thus becomes the sacred stage upon which Yeshua is fully revealed as priest, judge, and king, fulfilling both Torah and prophecy in perfect order. The final sabbatical year gathers the elect and frees the righteous. The following Jubilee year restores Israel's inheritance, resets the nations under Messiah, and establishes the millennial kingdom. Leviticus 25:39-41 and 54. If a countryman among you becomes destitute and sells himself to you, then you must not force him into slave labor. Let him stay with you as a hired worker or temporary resident. He is to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then he and his children are to be released, and he may return to his clan and to the property of his fathers. Even if he is not redeemed in any of these ways, he and his children shall be released in the year of Jubilee. The Jubilee year guarantees the release of Hebrew servants, as commanded in Leviticus 25:39-54. It marks the ultimate divine reset. Not only is the servant set free, but he is restored to his family and inheritance. This law prophetically foreshadows the liberation of the righteous remnant at the end of the age, when Messiah proclaims liberty and restores the inheritance of his people. The righteous remnant, protected for 1,260 days in the wilderness, is the group Messiah releases at the Jubilee. Their supernatural preservation fulfills God's covenant promise to hide his people during the time of wrath. Their release at the end of the Shemitah year and the beginning of the Jubilee year fulfills the Torah command to proclaim liberty throughout the land. They are the servants who go free, the faithful ones who endured and are now restored, not reaped like a harvest, but released like heirs returning to their inheritance. Those from the nations who live through the final sabbatical year and align themselves with Yahweh and his Messiah are included in the Jubilee release. Leviticus 25:10 says liberty is proclaimed to all inhabitants of the land, and Torah consistently affirms that faithful foreigners are entitled to covenantal inclusion and protection. In the end-time fulfillment, Jubilee freedom will be declared to all who have not rebelled, joined the beast, or rejected the king, regardless of ethnicity. The Torah teaches that Hebrew servants are freed either by a kinsman redeemer or by the Jubilee. Prophetically, this distinguishes between those redeemed early by Messiah before wrath begins, and those released by the Jubilee itself, the faithful remnant preserved through judgment, who are restored to inheritance and liberty at Messiah's return. Both fulfill Torah law, revealing the full redemptive work of Yeshua as Redeemer now, and as King of Jubilee at his return. Deuteronomy 15 reveals the release of the righteous at the opening of the sabbatical year, a gathered and rewarded harvest. Leviticus 25 reveals the final restoration at the Jubilee, when even those still in bondage are set free and return to their inheritance. Together they form the Torah's complete prophetic pattern for the harvest of the end of the age: release, rest, and restoration, perfectly timed to Yahweh's appointed cycles. Revelation 12:6. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where God had prepared a place for her to be nourished for 1,260 days. From my previous videos, I have presented that the abomination that causes desolation occurs on first fruits, the 20th of Nisan, 2028. Using inclusive counting, meaning counting the day of the 21st of Nisan forward 1,260 days, we arrive at Yom Kippur 2031. The abomination of desolation occurs on Nisan 20, and the woman's 1,260-day protection begins the next day, Nisan 21, the traditional day of the Red Sea crossing. This perfectly mirrors Israel's final separation from Egypt, and prophetically marks the moment when the faithful remnant is hidden in the wilderness, preserved through the Great Tribulation until Yom Kippur, when judgment is executed and the kingdom is restored. We then have 2 more day counts that begin inclusively at first fruits, and from the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. The other is, blessed is he who waits and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. The 1,290 days counted inclusively from first fruits 2028 lands on the 10th day of the 8th month 2031. After the Exodus, the calendar was reset, and the month of Abib or Nisan was made the first month of the year. This means that Noah's second month becomes the 8th month in the post-Exodus calendar. The 10th day of the 8th month is the prophetic day of final separation and inheritance. As Noah was sealed in the ark, so the righteous are separated to inherit the kingdom. This day concludes the 1,290-day countdown from the abomination of desolation and fulfills the sheep and goat judgment of Matthew 25, when the king sits to reward, separate, and restore the inheritance prepared since creation. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right, and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world." Blessed is he who waits and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. This is inclusive counting from the day of the abomination that causes desolation on first fruits to the first day of Hanukkah, the feast of dedication. The 1,335 days culminate not merely in survival, but in dedication, habitation, and glory. Just as the temple was rededicated in the days of the Maccabees after its defilement, so too the true sanctuary is rededicated after judgment. Even though the naos is judiciously vindicated within the final sabbatical year, it still requires cleansing and rededication to be fit for habitation. Blessed is the one who reaches the 1,335 days, not simply for enduring beyond the 1,290-day judgment, but because they now witness the rededication of the sanctuary and the glorious return of the King to dwell among his people. The final Shabuah incorporates and fulfills all of Yahweh's Moedim, from Passover to Tabernacles, and brings the harvest laws of Leviticus 25 to their once-and-for-all prophetic fulfillment. Each appointed time finds its final expression in real-time redemptive history, transforming what were once annual rehearsals into the last unfolding of Yahweh's covenantal plan. The agricultural cycle, the sabbatical structure, and the redemptive appointments all converge in this final 7-year window, ending with the Jubilee of Restoration. No further cycles are needed. This is the end of the age, the great harvest, the release of captives, and the return of the King. Hallelujah. I've done my best to present you with Torah law on how it may tie into the events of the harvest of the end of the age and the final Shabuah. Like always, I may be incorrect, but I present it to you for your consideration. Thank you very much for watching. Time is short to Yeshua's return. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Shalom.